But we want to talk about the election 2024 as we do get closer. And I want to bring in a political analyst, a friend here of Live Now from Fox, Brian Sobel. Thanks so much, Brian, for joining us. And I have to compliment you, Brian, because the last time we talked, it was just when Kamala Harris was getting onto the scene for presidential candidate. You said, hey, she's going to see this bump in the polls, and then it's going to fade down. Look where we're at right now, a very tight race, and she came down, and now we're about equal.
Well, Mike, thanks for the endorsement, but it's history. Mark Twain once wrote it, or so they say, that history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes, and that's the way it is with presidential politics. These conventions produce bumps, but to your point. As we speak today, this race is dead even. It's dead even if you look at it on a national basis, which isn't going to be how the president is going to be elected. The president will be elected through the Electoral College on a state-by-state basis. But if you look at it on a state-by-state basis, it's just razor thin.
Yeah, it really, really is. And, I want to ask you, because you still hear sometimes in the media, in some news articles, talking about that quote unquote undecided voter. Are there still that many out there to make a wave? And who are these undecided voters that don't know if they want Trump or Harris?
Really good question. It might be 3 or 4% max across the nation and state by state, especially in these 7 swing states. So that's the universe. But who they are probably independents and declined to states who had allegiance at one time or another, Mike, to either the Democrats or the Republicans. And what we know is that if you're an independent, as an example, you may have moved away from one of these 2 major parties, but you still sort of believe in what those parties stand for. You may have broken away for one reason or another, but your proclivity is still to be a Democrat if you were a Democrat, Republican if you were a Republican, even as an independent. So the job of these candidates and what they're trying to do is peel people off that have this natural proclivity for their own party and bring them over to the other side of the ledger. And that's why you're seeing this attempt to say, hey, I'm going to be a president for all Americans and that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And Brian, hold on one second. I see Kamala Harris speaking right now. Let's go to her, and then I'll bring you right back on to share some thoughts as well. So this one just popped up. Let's go to Kamala Harris speaking, and then Brian, I'll bring you right back in here. I want to bring in, once again, Brian Sobel, who is watching this along with me and talking with me as we're getting closer to the election. Brian, first off, your thoughts, as it looks like she is trying to be speaking to the media a little bit more than we've seen in the past.
About questions not being answered and that sort of thing. And that's exactly the criticism that she has taken from many, many quarters, including the media, is that she doesn't make herself available for questions, certainly not follow-ups. And as you heard there, over 3 questions, it's the same themology, almost the same words that she uses to describe everything. And that, speaking of concerning, people ought to be a little bit concerned about the fact that you hear the same sentences out of her over and over again. And of course, the general theme is that Trump is unfit for office, and now she's added a new component, which is that he may be essentially a tired old man who can't campaign. This is what happens in these presidential campaigns. I could dissect Donald Trump doing some of the same themology about Kamala Harris. So it's just the way it is.
And is there anything to maybe look into a little bit more, as if, do you think they are seeing maybe some internal polling that would suggest, hey, we need to put her out there a little bit more, put her out there? We saw her just do Bret Baier this week, and now looks like these impromptu news conferences. Is there anything to look into that?
Absolutely. I think she's trying to respond. Her camp is trying to respond to the criticism that she has been basically unavailable to the media. And the recent Fox interview was her way of saying, "Hey, I'll sit down with anybody." But if anybody did watch that interview, you came away quite frustrated with the lack of depth in both the answers and just the way the interview went. It was clearly a plan by the Harris camp to do the interview, which is a smart thing to do, but to really parry with the moderator from Fox, Bret Baier, and to not really get into depth. And the same answers that you just heard 2 minutes ago is what you heard during the Bret Baier interview. And this is how she's answering these questions over and over again.
And Brian, I also want to get your take. You see this a lot on social media postings where people are talking about the election and talking about the poly market, where Trump is versus Harris, and they're trying to gauge that as if that is like, of course, a betting market, but trying to almost say it's as a poll as well, but it's not. What is your take on seeing that? It seems like that is new in this election cycle and seems to be really having some sway, at least on social media.
Well, social media, Mike, has become so important that the campaigns have to pay attention to it. Not just one platform, but numerous platforms. It's complex. And you've got to decide on social media who is utilizing certain platforms and whether you're actually hitting your voters or missing your voters. So it's a whole new dynamic in campaigns. It also affects certainly where these candidates will go to speak in these 7 swing states. You saw that they spent some time in Pennsylvania. They were down in Arizona. And you see them, and this is the time of the campaign where you see all 4 candidates typically ending up in one place because they're watching the polling very carefully, they're watching social media very carefully, and they're trying to respond to trending.
Yeah, that is so true, and I'm glad that you said that there. As we come in to getting closer now to almost 2 weeks away, come Tuesday, what are the final phases for these 2 campaigns going to look like? Are they just going to continue to really barnstorm the 7 states, like you mentioned? Are we going to see even more interviews, more podcasts from the both of them? What's the final 2-week stretch going to look like?
The final 2 weeks is going to be very busy for these candidates. They will be hopping all over the country to hit those 7 states, those swing states, and you'll see the ads continue on radio, television, social media. You will see some of these small interviews. I do not think you're going to see, as an example, Kamala Harris sitting down, except in a very friendly environment, to do interviews. Donald Trump is also doing interviews with friendly television audiences and television moderators. You're going to see that. The only problem with that, Mike, is that they're speaking in silos. The people who watch CNN aren't watching Fox, and Fox are not watching CNN, and they choose to continue to talk to their own audiences, which is why I think the Harris campaign decided to do the Bret Baier interview, but I don't think it did her any favors because it was just 23 minutes of both of them talking over each other. And it really was designed by the Harris camp to be a filibuster, to get it done, check the box, and move on.
Yeah, there we go. It's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out, and of course, on election night. But Brian Sobel, thanks so much for joining us. As always, we appreciate it, giving us some insight, getting closer to 2 weeks now away. Thanks again, Brian.
Absolutely. And to all the viewers, get out and vote. It's important.